Kellen Maris stood at the edge of the massive trading hall on Fenkir Station, gazing at the busy marketplace. It was a marvel of alien architecture, with stalls set up in every direction, selling everything from advanced weaponry to rare spices from distant planets. The air was thick with strange smells, the sound of countless languages mixed with the hum of flying vehicles above. But Kellen was used to it. As the human envoy to the stars, he had seen much stranger things than this. Kellen wasn't here for fun, though. He was here on a mission. Earth needed new trade partners, and Fenkir Station was the perfect place to start. The station was a crossroads for dozens of species, and if he could make the right connections, humanity would have a foothold in the galaxy. But as he moved through the crowd, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was different today. That's when he saw her. She was standing by a stall selling glittering iridescent fabrics, her eyes fixed on him. Kellen couldn't help but notice her, the way she moved, with an almost unnatural grace. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver-blue hue, and her dark hair seemed to catch the light in strange ways. She wasn't human, that was clear. But there was something about her presence that felt magnetic. She wasn't like the other aliens he had encountered so far. Human, she said, her voice a soft, melodic tone that made Kellen's heart skip a beat. She spoke in flawless English, but there was an accent to it that he couldn't quite place. He froze for a moment, taken aback by her directness. Most aliens on this station didn't care much for humans. They saw them as just another species, nothing special. But this woman, whatever she was different. Yes, Kellen said, raising an eyebrow. Can I help you? The woman smiled slightly, though it wasn't a friendly smile. It was more curious. I've heard much about your kind, she said, but I don't understand. Why do you humans act the way you do? Kellen frowned. This was definitely not the usual greeting he got from alien traders. I'm not sure what you mean, he said, his voice cautious. You are strange, she continued, her eyes narrowing slightly. You have such power, and yet you are so fragile, so emotional. You are capable of creating beauty and destruction in equal measure, but it is your emotions that interest me the most. Kellen's curiosity piqued. You're saying humans are emotional? He wasn't sure where she was going with this. The woman nodded. Yes. You humans feel things deeply. Pain, joy, love, anger. You are driven by these emotions in a way no other species I've encountered is, and yet you continue to survive. You thrive. It is fascinating. Kellen shook his head, trying to understand. I don't think you're giving us enough credit. We're just people. We do our best to get by. She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. No, she said softly. You don't understand. It's not just that you survive. It's that you survive despite yourselves. You survive even when the odds are against you, when the universe seems to be doing everything in its power to destroy you. That is why I am interested in you. Kellen was taken aback by her intensity. You've been studying humans. She nodded, a faint smile crossing her lips again. Yes, my name is Iskra, and I am different. I have watched you humans for a long time, and I have come to believe that there is something unique about you, something that no other species possesses. Kellen found himself intrigued. So, what do you want with me? With humanity? Iskra's smile widened, though it was still laced with mystery. I want to understand. I want to know what makes you so resilient, and I want to know how it feels. How does it feel to love, to fight, to feel alive in a way no other species can? Her question caught Kellen off guard. He had never really thought about it in those terms before. Love, struggle, pain. They were just part of life, part of being human. But to her, it seemed like a puzzle that needed solving. I don't know, Kellen said, his voice uncertain. We just live our lives. We try to do what's right, and when we fail, we try again. But that's what we do. We keep going. Iskra studied him for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. I see. That is what I find so fascinating. You never stop, even when it seems impossible. And it is that persistence that makes you unlike any other species in the galaxy. Kellen wasn't sure how to respond. It wasn't every day someone told him his species was special. Most people just thought of humans as another race among many, but here was Iskra, talking as if humanity was something extraordinary. I don't know what you're after, but if you're looking for answers, I'm not sure I have them for you, Kellen said, stepping back slightly. He didn't fully trust Iskra yet, but he couldn't deny that there was something about her that was hard to ignore. Iskra smiled again, but this time it was softer, almost wistful. I don't need answers, Kellen Maris. I just need to understand. Kellen's eyes widened. She knew his name. How? Why? Before he could ask, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Kellen stood there for a moment, still processing what had just happened. Something about Iskra didn't sit right with him. There was something other about her, something that made him feel both uneasy and strangely drawn to her. But for now, he had a mission to complete. He would have to keep his focus. But in the back of his mind, Iskra's words lingered. You are unlike any other species I have encountered. And Kellen couldn't help but wonder what she really meant by that. The next morning, Kellen received a message that would change everything. It was from Iskra. She had left the trading hall the day before without another word. But now, on his datapad, there was an invitation. It was simple, yet strange. Meet me at the docking bay, human. I have something to show you. Kellen hesitated. He had been briefed about the Charon people, the species Iskra belonged to. The Charons were known for being reclusive and mysterious. They rarely interacted with outsiders, and when they did, it was usually to trade rare technology or knowledge. But they were also a proud race, and their interest in humanity was unusual. Despite his hesitation, Kellen couldn't shake the curiosity Iskra had sparked in him. He had to see what she wanted. The docking bay was on the far side of Fenker Station, far from the hustle of the marketplace. As Kellen walked through the quiet halls, his thoughts raced. Why had Iskra invited him? What did she want from him? Was she just another alien trying to understand humanity, or was there something more? When he reached the bay, he found Iskra waiting for him by a sleek, silver ship. The ship was unlike anything Kellen had ever seen. It had an almost organic shape, as if it had been grown rather than built. It pulsed with a faint light, and he could feel a strange energy coming from it. You're here, Iskra said, her voice warm, but with an edge of something darker. Good. We need to talk. Kellen frowned. Talk? About what? Iskra stepped closer to him, her eyes fixed on his with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. I want to show you something, Kellen, she said softly. Something that will change the way you see everything. Kellen crossed his arms. What are you talking about? Iskra gestured toward the ship. Come with me, and you'll understand. Without another word, she led him inside. The interior of the ship was even more strange and beautiful than the outside. It was filled with glowing panels, strange symbols, and soft, humming sounds. The air was thick with a sweet, unfamiliar scent that made Kellen's head spin for a moment. As the ship powered up, and they began to move away from Fenker Station, Iskra turned to Kellen, her expression serious. I'm taking you to my homeworld, she said. Kellen blinked. Your homeworld? That's a big step. Why? Iskra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she moved to a control panel and began typing in a series of commands. The ship hummed in response, picking up speed as they moved farther into deep space. It felt like they were heading into the unknown, far from any known planets or stars. You've heard the stories, haven't you? She asked after a long pause. About the Chirons, about how we've kept to ourselves for centuries, how we've stayed away from other species, content in our isolation. Kellen nodded. Yeah, I've heard. You're not exactly the most friendly race in the galaxy. Iskra's lips twitched into a faint smile. It's true, but that's changing. For the first time in our history, we're reaching out. We're trying to find something we lost long ago. And I believe you humans hold the key to that. Kellen frowned, trying to understand. What do you mean? What do you need from us? Iskra looked at him with a strange mixture of longing and frustration. Not just from you. From your kind. Humanity. You have something no one else does, something no one else understands. It's your emotional depth. Your ability to feel things in a way no other species can. We Charons have been studying this for a long time. We've tried to replicate it, to harness it, but we've failed over and over again. Kellen was silent for a moment, trying to process her words. So, you're saying you want to use us? No, Iskra said, shaking her head. I want to understand you. I want to know what makes you so alive. I've watched your species for so long, Kellen. You have this strength, this will to survive, no matter the odds. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. I believe it's more than just instinct. There's something deeper at work, and I want to understand it. I want to know how it feels. Kellen felt a chill run down his spine. There was something unsettling about the way she spoke, almost as if she didn't view humanity as equals. She wasn't just curious, she was obsessed. You're asking me to go to your homeworld, to help you understand this feeling? Kellen asked slowly. Iskra nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes, but it's more than that. I'm asking you to trust me, Kellen, because what I'm about to show you could change everything. It could change the way your people live. It could change the entire galaxy. Kellen's mind raced. He didn't know if he could trust her. He didn't know if he could trust anyone from the Charon race. But something about Iskra's words lingered in his mind. She wasn't just asking for knowledge. She was asking for something deeper. And he couldn't help but wonder if this was all part of a larger plan. As the ship accelerated toward the distant Charon homeworld, Kellen knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary mission. And the questions in his mind were only growing. The journey to Charon homeworld felt longer than it should have. The ship's smooth hum filled the silence between Kellen and Iskra. They had spoken little since she had told him of the Charon's deep interest in humanity. Kellen's mind spun with questions, each one building on the last. What did they want from humans? Why him? And why now? When they finally arrived, Kellen's breath caught in his throat. The Charon homeworld was unlike any planet he had ever seen. It was covered in vast cities that seemed to float above the surface, connected by shimmering bridges of light. The atmosphere was a glowing shade of green, and the skies were streaked with clouds of silver. There were no towering skyscrapers or sprawling factories. Instead, the cities seemed to blend seamlessly with nature, with trees and vines growing over buildings as if the entire world had been designed to live in harmony with itself. Iskra's ship descended slowly, landing with a soft thud on a landing pad made of stone. As Kellen stepped out of the ship, he felt a strange mix of awe and unease. He had heard of the Charon's advanced technology, but seeing it firsthand was a different experience entirely. The air was clean, and the environment felt almost too perfect, too controlled. "Welcome to Chira," Iskra said as she stepped beside him, her voice almost reverent. "This is where my people have lived for millennia. It's a place of peace, but peace comes at a cost." Kellen followed her as she led him through the vast city. The streets were quiet, and there were few people walking around. Most of the Charons appeared to be working inside the buildings, and those few who were outside watched Kellen with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. "It's beautiful," Kellen said, glancing around at the towering trees and smooth, glowing structures. "It is," Iskra agreed, "but that's not why I brought you here. I want to show you something that may help you understand why I've brought you to my homeworld." They entered a large building made entirely of glass. Inside, Kellen could see rows of machines and strange devices he couldn't identify. Some of them looked like medical equipment, others like strange experiments. The room was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the machines. "Here," Iskra said, leading Kellen to a central console. "This is where we study the human spirit." Kellen raised an eyebrow. "The human spirit? What does that even mean?" Iskra paused, a flicker of something unspoken crossing her face. "It's what makes humans different. Your emotions, your ability to feel things so deeply, your strength, even in the face of impossible odds. It's something we Chirans have never been able to replicate. We've tried, of course, but our experiments have always failed." Kellen was silent for a moment. He didn't know how to respond. He had always thought of emotions as just part of being human, something natural. But here, on this strange world, it seemed like something much more, something powerful, something desirable. "Why are you telling me this?" Kellen asked, trying to make sense of it all. "Because," Iskra said, turning to face him, "we believe that you humans hold the key to unlocking what we've been searching for. Our people have studied your kind for years. We've watched your wars, your victories, your struggles, and in all of it, we've seen something that we've never seen in ourselves. Hope. Your ability to keep fighting, to keep going, even when everything seems lost." Kellen felt a chill run through him. "You want to take that from us, don't you?" His voice was sharp, the suspicion he had felt earlier growing into something more dangerous. "No," Iskra said quickly, her voice softer than before. "I don't want to take anything from you, Kellen. I want to understand it. I want to know what makes humans survive, what makes you so strong, even when you're weak. We've studied your biology, your physiology, but we can't understand the part that makes you human." Kellen frowned. "You're asking me to let you experiment on us, to turn us into something you can control." Iskra shook her head. "No, that's not it. We're not trying to control you. We want to learn from you. We want to understand the core of what makes you, well, you." Kellen was quiet for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He couldn't deny that there was something compelling about what she was saying. There was a part of him that wanted to know the answer to the question she was asking. What made humanity so resilient? What made them keep going, even when the odds were stacked against them? But another part of him, the part that still trusted his instincts, was telling him to be careful. This was a Chiran, after all, a race that had kept to itself for centuries. What were they really after? "I still don't understand," Kellen said finally. "Why me? Why now?" Iskra turned to face him, her eyes intense. "Because, Kellen, you are the first human to come to us willingly. You are the first to look beyond the surface and see that we don't just want to study you. We want to understand you." She paused, then added in a softer tone, "And perhaps I just want to understand you, Kellen, on a deeper level." Kellen stared at her for a long moment, his mind a swirl of emotions. He didn't know what to believe anymore. All he knew was that there was something different about Iskra, something that made her words harder to ignore. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the machines. In that silence, Kellen couldn't help but wonder, what would humanity's future look like if the Chiran succeeded in unlocking the mysteries of human emotion? And more importantly, what would that mean for him, for Iskra? And for all of humanity, the days that followed were strange and unsettling for Kellen. He had been living among the Chirans for almost a week now, and while he was surrounded by the beauty of their world, he couldn't shake the unease he felt every time he saw Iskra. She was always watching him, always studying him with that intense gaze. It was as if she was trying to read him, trying to find something deep inside that he didn't even know was there. Iskra had shown him more of the Chiran technology, machines that could read emotions, devices that could measure the depth of a person's feelings. She spoke of the long years her people had spent trying to replicate human emotions, but each attempt had failed. They could study the physical aspects of emotion, the heartbeat, the sweating, the changes in brain activity, but they couldn't capture the essence of what it meant to truly feel. The resilience, the hope, The drive to survive. And Kellen was still trying to understand why. Why had she chosen him for this? Why had she brought him here? Every time he asked her, she would only look at him with those unreadable eyes and say, "You're the key, Kellen. You have the answers we need." But the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. What answers? Was he just a subject in an experiment, or was there something deeper going on here? Today, Iskra had invited him to a new place, a small, quiet room at the heart of the city, far from the bustle of the high-tech labs. It was simple, with large windows that looked out over the lush landscape, and a soft, comfortable chair at the center of the room. "I want you to relax, Kellen," she said when he stepped inside. "This is where you'll be able to understand what we're trying to achieve." Kellen looked around, still unsure. "What do you want me to do?" Iskra smiled, but it was a different smile this time. Not the mysterious, knowing smile, but something softer, something that seemed almost personal. "I want you to experience what we've learned," she said, walking over to a control panel. "We've developed a way to connect with human emotions, to see them, feel them. I want you to let us in. Let us understand you." Kellen hesitated. He didn't know if he could trust her. Everything about this situation felt wrong. He had been sent here as an ambassador for Earth, but he was starting to feel like he was nothing more than a specimen in a lab. Yet there was something about Iskra's sincerity, something about the way she spoke, that made him wonder. "What do you mean, let you in?" Kellen asked, his voice unsure. Iskra turned and walked toward him, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "We have a machine. A device that can link our minds together. We can share emotions, thoughts. You can experience what we feel, and we can experience what you feel. It's an exchange." Kellen swallowed hard. "And what happens after that? What do you do with what you learn?" Iskra didn't immediately answer. She stepped closer, her presence almost overwhelming. "What we learn is for the good of both of our species. We Cherans are dying, Kellen. Our race has lost the ability to feel as you do. We no longer have the strength to survive the way your people do. You have what we need. You have life." Kellen's heart skipped a beat. He had heard the rumors about the Cherans, that their race was dying out, that they had lost something crucial. But hearing it from Iskra's lips made it all feel real. He couldn't deny the desperation in her voice. "But why me?" he asked again, his voice more forceful now. "Why are you asking me? Why not just take it from others?" Iskra's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something darker behind her eyes. "Because you're different, Kellen. You choose to live. Your kind has a fire in them that we cannot replicate. We've studied other species, but none of them are like humans. We need you, Kellen. We need to understand how you endure." Kellen took a step back, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I don't know if I can help you. I'm just one person. I don't know what you want me to do." Iskra reached out, her hand hovering just above his arm. "You don't have to do anything, Kellen. Just let me in. Let me feel what you feel. It's the only way we can truly understand." Kellen stared at her hand, the soft glow of the room reflecting off her pale skin. There was something so vulnerable about her, something that made him want to trust her. But at the same time, there was a gnawing feeling in his gut that told him to walk away. "I'm not sure I can," he said slowly. "You're asking me to give you something that makes us who we are. And I don't know if I'm ready to let you in like that." Iskra's face fell, her expression unreadable. She took a step back, her eyes flicking to the control panel. "I understand," she said quietly, "but you must know that time is running out. If you refuse, we may never get another chance. Our research may never succeed." Kellen looked away, torn between the pull he felt toward her and the overwhelming need to protect what made humanity special. He had come here on a mission, but he had never expected it to lead to this, a choice between trust and survival. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but uncertain. "I need time to think." Iskra nodded, her face softening once more. Take all the time you need, Kellen. But remember, the offer will not wait forever." With that, she turned and left the room, leaving Kellen alone with his thoughts. As the door slid shut behind her, he felt the weight of the decision before him. Was he willing to give up part of himself to help a dying species? Was he willing to risk everything for an unknown future? Outside the window, the Chiron world seemed peaceful, untouched by the chaos of the galaxy. But within that peace, something dark was stirring. And Kellen knew, no matter what he decided, his life, humanity's future, would never be the same again. The days after Kellen's conversation with Iskra were filled with confusion. He spent most of his time wandering the peaceful streets of the Chiron city, his mind never at rest. The choice that Iskra had given him weighed heavily on him. He had thought he understood their request, to share human emotions, to let them feel what humans feel. But now he wasn't so sure. Was it truly a harmless experiment, or was there something darker at play? The truth was, he didn't know what to think anymore. The Chirons had lived in isolation for centuries, and now, suddenly, they were reaching out to humanity. Was it desperation, or was there something more to their interest in him? He couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that he was missing something crucial. Every night, Iskra would visit him. She would ask him to join her in the labs, to help with their research, but Kellen always refused. She never pushed him, never seemed angry. Instead, she would simply leave, and he would be alone again with his thoughts. The truth was, he didn't know how much longer he could resist her. The temptation to understand what the Chirons wanted, to understand his own emotions, was growing stronger. But the fear that something would go terribly wrong was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. It was late one evening when he finally made up his mind. He stood by the large windows of his quarters, staring out at the glowing horizon of the Chiron world. The city below him looked peaceful, too peaceful, perhaps. There was no sign of the chaos that plagued humanity, no signs of struggle, no signs of life in the raw, uncontrolled way that humans experienced it. It was beautiful, yes, but it lacked the fire that burned within every human heart. It lacked the urgency to survive, the will to fight for something better. Iskra had been right about one thing. Humanity was different. Humans felt deeply. They fought. They survived. And for some reason, the Chirons needed to understand that. But what would it mean for humanity if they succeeded? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Kellen." Iskra's voice came through the door, calm and steady. "Are you ready?" He took a deep breath and walked to the door. There she was, standing in the hallway, her expression as unreadable as ever. "I've been thinking," Kellen said, his voice firm. "I'll help you. I'll let you in." Iskra's eyes lit up, but there was no smile on her lips. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Kellen nodded. "I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but it's the only way to understand what you need, to see if we can trust each other." She stepped closer, and for a moment, Kellen thought he saw a flash of something in her eyes, a brief flicker of emotion, but it was gone before he could fully understand it. "I'm glad you've made your decision," Iskra said quietly. "Come with me." She led him through the halls of the facility, her footsteps echoing in the silence. They walked deeper into the heart of the city, to a building Kellen hadn't seen before. The structure was sleek and modern, but there was something about it that felt clinical, cold. The further they went, the more the feeling of unease crept into Kellen's chest. Finally, they'd reached a small room, almost like a med bay, but with advanced technology surrounding them. Machines hummed softly in the background, their lights blinking rhythmically. At the center of the room was a large chair, surrounded by glowing consoles and monitors. Iskra turned to face him. "This is where it will happen, Kellen. We'll connect our minds here. We'll share our feelings, our thoughts. You'll feel everything." Kellen swallowed hard, but he nodded. He had made his choice, and now there was no turning back. She guided him to the chair, and as he sat down, He felt a strange sense of calm. His heart was still racing, but there was an odd peace settling over him. Iskra connected wires to his temples, and suddenly the room seemed to fade away. He felt lightheaded for a moment, and then everything went still. "Close your eyes," Iskra instructed softly. "Let go of your fears. Let me in." Kellen did as she asked. Slowly, the room around him seemed to disappear entirely. He could still hear the machines, still feel the wires on his skin, but everything else was gone. And then there was a soft pull, something reaching into his mind, pulling him deeper. At first, it was just a feeling, a strange, warm sensation that seemed to spread from his chest to the tips of his fingers and toes. Then, slowly, it grew stronger. He could feel Iskra's presence, her emotions. There was something overwhelming about it, like an ocean of feelings crashing against him. But it wasn't just her feelings. He could feel his own emotions too, amplified in a way that he had never experienced. Fear, excitement, anger, joy. Every feeling he had ever had was now more intense than ever before. He gasped, his heart racing. "Iskra, what's happening?" "This is what we've been looking for," she whispered, her voice strangely distant yet close at the same time. "This is what we need to understand." Kellen's mind was spinning. It was too much emotion, too much life. He couldn't keep up with it all. He could feel Iskra's desperation, her desire to understand. But he could also feel something darker, something hidden beneath the surface of her emotions. Suddenly, Kellen was pulled from the experience. The room around him snapped back into focus. He was panting, his heart pounding. He looked up at Iskra, who was watching him with wide, intense eyes. "That wasn't just an experiment, was it?" Kellen asked, his voice shaking. Iskra hesitated. "No, Kellen, it was more than that. You have no idea how much we need this, how much I need this." Kellen sat in the quiet room, still reeling from the intense emotions he had just experienced. His chest was tight, and his head throbbed with the pressure of what had just happened. It felt like his mind had been pulled apart and put back together. And yet, there was something missing. The lingering feeling that he couldn't shake, no matter how hard he tried. He looked over at Iskra, who was standing silently by the console, her gaze fixed on him. She seemed almost distant, as if lost in her own thoughts. "That was," Kellen began, his voice hoarse, but he couldn't find the words to describe what he had just felt. "I know," Iskra replied softly, turning to face him. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" Kellen nodded, unable to speak. His emotions were still swirling inside him, mixing together in a way that made it difficult to focus. The fear, the hope, the anger, they were all too much. And then there was Iskra's presence. The way she had connected with him so deeply, her emotions reaching into his soul like an unseen force. "I didn't think it would be like this," Kellen whispered, more to himself than to her. "I thought I understood, but I didn't. This is too much." Iskra took a few steps forward, her voice gentle. "You're not alone in this, Kellen. I understand how you feel. But you have to understand, too. This is the only way. We need this to survive." "Why?" Kellen asked, his voice shaking with frustration. "Why is it so important? Why does it have to be me? You could have chosen anyone. Why did you pick me?" Iskra looked down, her face softening. For the first time, Kellen saw something like regret in her eyes. "Because you're different," she said quietly. "You have something we can't replicate. Your emotions, Kellen, your strength, your survival instinct. These are things we can't create. We need you to show us how to feel again." Kellen stood up, his fists clenching at his sides. "You want to take that from me, don't you? You want to take my humanity and turn it into something you can control." "No," Iskra said quickly, stepping closer. "I don't want to control you, Kellen. I want to understand you. We've lost our way, and you, your species, are the only ones who still have what we've lost. I need to know what it feels like to be alive, to be human." Kellen took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He was angry. He was confused. But he also felt a strange empathy for Iskra, a part of him understanding the desperation in her voice. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Kellen said, his voice breaking. "I'm not sure I can help you, Iskra. I don't know what you want from me. And it's too much. I'm losing myself." Iskra's expression darkened. "You don't understand. If you leave now, we may never get another chance. The connection we made today was fleeting. You felt it, didn't you? The way everything was so intense, so real." Kellen nodded slowly. "I felt it, but it was too much. It's like I could hear you in my head, feel everything you felt. And I don't know if I want that. It's too powerful, too dangerous." "You're afraid," Iskra said, her voice a mix of sadness and something else, something darker. "I understand. But fear is a part of it. Fear is something we've lost. And if we don't understand it, if we don't understand you, we'll never survive." Kellen shook his head, stepping away from her. "You keep saying that, but I don't know what you mean. What do you want me to do, Iskra? What is it that you need from me?" "I need your trust," she said softly, her voice almost pleading. "I need you to let me in completely. I need to understand how to live again." The words hung in the air between them, and Kellen felt a deep chill creep down his spine. He had been so sure that he could control the situation, that he could keep his emotions and his humanity safe from the Chirans. But now, standing here in front of Iskra, he wasn't sure anymore. Was he just a tool for them? Was he going to lose everything that made him human? He looked into her eyes, and for the first time, he saw something different. It wasn't the cold, calculated look of a scientist or the desperate gaze of someone trying to gain control. It was something far more vulnerable, something real. "I don't know if I can trust you," Kellen said, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust anyone here. Everything feels like a lie." Iskra stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Please, Kellen, you don't understand what's at stake. If we don't find a way to feel, if we don't find a way to be human again, we'll all die. The Chirans, we've lost our soul. And without you, we'll never get it back." Kellen stood there for a long time, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. He had come to Chira to learn about the Chirans, to help humanity, but now he was trapped in something he didn't fully understand. He could feel Iskra's pain, her need, but he also knew that giving in to her request might mean losing himself forever. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "I can't help you. Not like this." Iskra's face fell, and for a moment, Kellen thought he saw something darker in her eyes, something dangerous. "Then you leave me no choice," she whispered. Kellen stood frozen, the weight of Iskra's words hanging heavily in the air. "Then you leave me no choice," she whispered, her voice low, almost like a threat. For a moment, Kellen didn't move. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in around him. He had been trying to protect himself, trying to resist the pull of the Chirans and their strange, overwhelming request. But now, as he looked into Iskra's eyes, he saw something new, something desperate, something dark. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, unsure if he wanted to know the answer. Iskra's eyes were filled with an emotion he couldn't fully read. There was a flicker of pain mixed with determination. She took a step toward him, her movements slow and deliberate. "I've told you, Kellen," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "We need you. We need to understand what you have. Without it, without your emotions, we will die. And I can't let that happen. I won't let it happen." Kellen shook his head, his heart pounding in his chest. This wasn't what he had signed up for. He had come to Chira as an ambassador, but now it felt like he was trapped in some kind of twisted game. He didn't know if he could trust Iskra anymore. He didn't know if he could trust anyone. "Iskra, I can't help you like this. I won't let you take what makes me human. You can't have that. It's who I am, Kellen said, his voice growing more firm, more sure. I'm not just some experiment. I'm not just a tool for your survival. Iskra's expression darkened, and for a moment, Kellen saw a flash of something cold and unyielding behind her eyes. It was the same look she had given him earlier, when she had first asked him to share his emotions. The same look that made him feel like he was nothing more than a subject in a lab, a specimen to be studied, dissected, and ultimately discarded. You don't understand, Kellen, she said, her voice low and almost defeated. We are dying. You're our last hope. If you leave now, we may never get another chance. Your emotions, your humanity, it's all that's left for us. Kellen felt the pull in his chest, the urge to listen, to give in. She was right, in a way. The Chirans were desperate, and they had been for a long time. He could feel it in every word she spoke, in every gesture she made. But he couldn't ignore the warning that had been growing inside him from the very beginning. What if I don't want to help you? Kellen asked, his voice steady but tinged with anger. What if I can't give you what you want? For a moment, there was silence. The tension between them was thick, almost suffocating. Iskra didn't answer immediately, her gaze flickering to the console behind her. Kellen could see her fingers trembling, but whether it was from fear or anger, he couldn't tell. Finally, she spoke, her voice almost a whisper. Then I'll have to take it from you, Kellen. I'll have to take what I need by force. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Kellen took a step back, his breath quickening. He had known there was danger here, but this was something he hadn't prepared for. Was she really willing to do that? To take his humanity? I won't let you do that, he said, his voice hard, full of resolve. Iskra's face softened, but there was still something dark in her eyes. You don't have a choice. If you won't give it to me willingly, I'll have no choice but to take it. Before Kellen could react, Iskra moved. In one fluid motion, she pressed a button on the console, and the room around them seemed to shift. A low hum filled the air, and the lights flickered as the machines powered up. Kellen's heart raced as he realized what was happening. She wasn't just threatening him. She was going to force the connection, to link their minds in a way he couldn't escape. No, Kellen shouted, stepping backward. I won't let you do this. But it was too late. The machines were already humming louder, their energy crackling in the air. Kellen could feel something pulling at him, something invisible, yet powerful, grabbing hold of his mind and his emotions. He tried to fight it, tried to push back, but it was like trying to escape from quicksand. The more he struggled, the stronger the pull became. Iskra was right there, her eyes locked on his, and Kellen could feel her desperation as she reached out with her mind, her emotions wrapping around his like a vice. You have to understand, Kellen, she said, her voice soft but insistent. We need this. We need you. We need to feel again. Kellen's mind was spinning. He could feel her inside his thoughts, her emotions flooding his mind. But he also felt his own emotions, the fear, the anger, the raw, unfiltered humanity that burned inside him. It was all mixing together, and for a moment, he couldn't tell where her feelings ended and his began. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the connection snapped. The room went silent, and Kellen gasped for air, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt drained, empty, like something vital had been taken from him. Iskra stood across from him, her face pale, her eyes wide with a strange mixture of relief and something else, something he couldn't quite understand. It's done, she said quietly. You've helped us. Kellen felt sick to his stomach. He had given up a part of himself, something he could never get back. He didn't know what Iskra had taken from him, but he felt it deep inside. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure if he could ever feel whole again. Iskra watched him, waiting for a response. But Kellen had nothing left to say. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences.